And welcome to another edition of Up to the Second College Football. I'm David Nuño. We do it for the Saturdays. We do it for the culture. And it's week 2 of the college football season. We're joined by Coach Mark Richt, who obviously coached at Georgia. We saw him at the University of Miami. We see him all over the television at the ACC network. And now a new author with his book out, Make the Call, Game Day Wisdom for Life's Defining Moments. Coach, thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be here. How you been?
Doing all right, my friend. So let's first off start off with you. In July, that you announced that you were diagnosed with Parkinson's. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How are your spirits?
Right. I feel great. I just move slow. I'm in stage 1 of Parkinson's, which one of the main symptoms is something called bradykinesia. Brady means slow. Kinesia means movement. So I just kind of move slower than normal. And what used to be normal, I guess this is my new normal. But I feel good. I've been taking care of myself. I've lost some weight. I've been working out, doing all the things, eating healthy, doing things you should have done maybe for the last 35 years. And so I feel great, but I have Parkinson's. There's no denying it. There's no cure for it. The goal is just to stay in stage 1 as long as possible.
Coach, if you can, tell us how the book came together, Make the Call, Game Day Wisdom for Life's Defining Moments.
Well, I thought about writing the book back when I was head coach at Georgia, and I started the process knowing I had a short window of time one summer, and I don't know what made me think I could get it done. But by the time we were reviewing chapter 1, 2-a-days had started, so I just had to set the book aside and say forget about it for now. And then after I retired from coaching, leaving Miami, my literary agent came back and said, let's do the book. I said, I don't know if I want to do it or not right now. And then about a month later, I had a heart attack, which was great. And so after that, I'm like, if I'm going to write this book, I better hurry up and write it because you never know what tomorrow will bring. So decided to go ahead and write it.
Well, I know that your relationship with Coach Bowden, who obviously passed a couple of weeks back, what did he mean to you and the impact in helping write his book as well?
Well, I loved Coach for a lot of reasons. He allowed me to coach quarterbacks as a graduate assistant coach, just coming out of college, basically. Had a couple tryouts in the NFL, got cut a couple times, but, a couple years out of college, I'm coaching the quarterbacks. And so from a professional standpoint, he gave me an opportunity that was, I didn't even know how good it was until I look back on it. But more importantly, after the unfortunate death of one of our players, Pablo Lopez, who had gotten shot at a campus party during an open date, the very next day he had a team meeting, which I was at. He was talking to the players and basically said he didn't know where Pablo would spend eternity because he didn't know where he was in his faith. And he said, that chair is empty right there. Pablo used to sit in that chair. He said, you guys are 18 to 22 years old. You think you're going to live forever like Pablo thought he was. And now he's gone. He said, if that was you last night, instead of Pablo, do you know where you'd spend eternity? And he's talking to the players, but I heard it. And I thought about where I'd be if it was me the night before. And I knew it wasn't going to be a good place. So I came to his office the next day and told him, said, Coach, I heard what you're saying to the players. I hope you don't mind me coming in here, but I need Jesus. And so I prayed to receive Christ right there in his office. And so now, even, the fact that I know, when it's all over, I'm going to heaven, that there's peace in that. There's hope in that. When you get a diagnosis like Parkinson's, if the only thing you have is what you have on this earth, there's not a lot to look forward to. But when you're going to heaven for all of eternity, that there's a lot of hope in that. So I give Coach Bowden credit for that for sure.
It's a beautiful story, Coach. I want to ask you the title, Make the Call. Give me maybe some tough calls you've had to make in your career and your life.
Yeah, just so many. When you coach at a major college like that, there's so many calls that have to be made throughout a season. And some of the toughest calls are not on the field as much as it might have to do with disciplining of a player. I mean, it's one thing to take some playing time away from a kid for not getting it yet, trying to get him straight. But every once in a while, a guy would do something a little bit on the egregious side or just chronically not staying with the program and you decide it's time he's got to leave the program. Those are some gut wrenching decisions for sure. And, so there's a lot of calls made outside of the game. Some of the calls you make during the game are not that hard to make, but sometimes they're hard to live with because of the results. And when you call, you think it's a good idea. And after it's over, you realize maybe it wasn't such a good idea. And then you got to answer to it. So the goal in those cases is to own it. If you make a mistake, own it in front of your team and in front of your staff and your fan base, and then move on in a positive, confident way.
Coach Richt, I got to ask you some football questions now. The Clemson-Georgia game, goodness, great defense being played in that one. Your thoughts on what you saw there Saturday night?
Right. Well, I predicted that it was going to be that kind of game. I didn't think it would be where no team would score a touchdown, offensive touchdown. But I knew that both defensive lines were stout. I knew they'd be tough to deal with. I felt like each quarterback needed protection. They're not that mobile. Each quarterback needed a running game. And if the offensive lines, I felt like whichever offensive line did the best would give their team the best chance of winning. But neither offensive line played that great. And I just was impressed with both teams' defense. Obviously, Georgia winning the game obviously was a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Clemson still has a lot to play for, but Georgia better get some answers on offense themselves, or they're going to run against some teams that could score points and they won't be able to keep pace.
How surprised were you with all these close games and North Carolina falling? You had the Oklahoma game with Tulane that was super close. Iowa State also surviving. Right. A lot of close games in college football.
Right. Yeah, there really were. I actually picked Virginia Tech to win that game against North Carolina. I know how good of a quarterback Sam Howell is, but, he lost 2,000-yard rushers, 2 1,000-yard rushers, and 2 almost 1,000-yard receivers. And even though you got talent behind them, it's not the same. And if you're going to catch North Carolina at a good time, it'd be the first game of the year, and that's exactly what happened. So the bottom line was Virginia Tech playing at home, having that crowd noise for the first time in 2 years, and they were ready. They did a heck of a job. I got a chance to see a little bit of the Oklahoma-Tulane game, and that was wild. Tulane looked like they were going to take it after they got that onside kick. I'm like, they hadn't gotten stopped yet, but Oklahoma finally just decided to bring the house and put the kid on the ground. But it was a wild game for sure.
Coach Richt, this show originates in College Station, so A&M is making their first trip to Colorado for the season, obviously. Your thoughts on A&M moving to number 5 in a road trip against Colorado?
Yeah, I was from Colorado. I grew up in a town called Broomfield, Colorado, about 20 miles outside of Boulder. And the thing that people they'll underestimate is the light air there. It's just there's a lot of truth to people coming from humid climates to hardly any humidity whatsoever, and the altitude plays a factor, especially with kids that might have a sickle cell trait or whatever in their blood. It's not an easy thing, and you can't get used to it in a 2-day period. So, I think you got to be very careful about the fatigue of the Texas A&M team, and I know they have depth, but I'd be subbing freely and early and often to make sure everybody gets through the game healthy.
Last thing for you, how does Coach Saban do it every year? Goodness gracious, that game against Miami, they just midseason form, new quarterback, right. No problem.
Well, in politics, you follow the money, they say, and in college football, you follow the recruiting. And obviously, they've been recruiting at a super high level for so long. And they do everything in the world that you can to develop a player. They've got outstanding coaches. They have a system that people believe in. It's just a perpetual first-round draft pick machine. And, you could just – I told people in the ACC, I said, you just watch how big their linemen are. Look how big their D linemen. Their corners look like safeties. Their safeties look like linebackers. Their linebackers look like outside linebackers. Their outside linebackers look like D tackles. It's just a different body type than you're used to playing against.
Coach Richt, we're praying for you. Thank you so much for making time for us. And I remind everybody, make the call. Game day wisdom for life's defining moments. Thank you again for joining the show.
I enjoyed it. Have a great day.
All right, rolling through here on Up to the Second College Football, our big game spotlight. We've got number 12 Oregon visiting number 3 Ohio State, and I got a couple of insiders for us right here. Kevin Noon, BuckeyesCoop.com, and we also have Max Torres, SI's Duck Digest. Guys, how are you?
Doing great.
Doing well. Glad to talk about this matchup.
Yeah, I'm excited about it as well. Kevin, let's start off with you. C.J. Stroud against Minnesota. First half, he had some struggles. He was able to evolve and get really good at the end of that game. What changed for him?
Yeah, I just think he got a little bit more comfortable. I mean, certainly having receivers like Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and getting a 70-yard touchdown from Trevion Henderson certainly padded the numbers with his 4 touchdowns, close to 300 yards. You know, it was a big ask. I mean, it wasn't his first year in the program, but it was the first pass attempt he's had in college. Put him in a relatively hostile environment playing up there at Huntington Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. You know, he just really needed to feel a little more sure of himself. I think as the game evolved, they were able to make some adjustments along the way. You know, I'm expecting to see a huge improvement from game 1 to game 2, you know, home cooking, being able to play at Ohio Stadium, having fans that are not just after him at that point. But, I think Ohio State's going to just make sure that they have a game plan where he can kind of take what's given to him.
Max, help me understand what happened with Oregon against Fresno State. Why was that game so tight?
Yeah, I think that's the million-dollar question, right? A lot of people were wondering why the Ducks kind of looked a little sluggish. I mean, to their credit, though, they did come out really solid to start things off, forced 2 turnovers in the first half, and they were able to convert those turnovers into points, which is really crucial just when you're looking at an execution standpoint. But the thing is kind of unraveled. It looks like the defense really kind of broke down and Hayner was able to kind of just pick them apart. They were picking on Triquez Bridges a little bit. He was getting his first decent amount of playing time at corner, but it kind of just seemed like it was a little bit of undisciplined ball, and then things slowed down on the offensive end as well. Offensive line was a little inconsistent. Looked a little bit better in the run game than the passing protection for that, but it just wasn't really what they expected, and I think that's one of the biggest things that this Oregon team needs to focus on, especially this week. But bigger picture in the whole season is just being consistent and playing up to their talent level.
All right, Max, we'll keep it with you. What happened? What's the latest with Thibodeau? How's he doing? Is he going to play this weekend?
Yeah, so no word on if he's officially going to be available just yet. Talking to Cristobal earlier this week, he's saying that it is an ankle sprain and that he is improving, but they're evaluating that day to day. We're supposed to talk to him again tomorrow, so depending on when you're watching this, that's going to be Wednesday. But definitely with Cristobal, he's been holding his cards very close to the chest, and they're going to need to have Thibodeau if they want a shot at this one.
Kevin, Ohio State's defense, what has to change this weekend against a high-powered Oregon team?
I think Ohio State needs to make sure that it's not out there trying to match personnel over and over and over again. We saw wholesale hockey line changes against Minnesota. Minnesota was running a lot of 13 personnel, 1 back, 3 tights, bringing in 6 offensive linemen, bringing in 7 offensive linemen. Very much a run-dominated team. They're going to see much more of a balanced attack out of Oregon, so I don't think we're going to see a situation of where the Buckeyes are going to be bringing 3-4 guys in at a time every play after play after play. I think we need to see a little bit more consistency out of the secondary. They were starting a freshman, a true freshman, and a redshirt freshman with Denzel Burke and with Ryan Watts. They need to see if they're going to be getting Seven Banks back, if they're going to be getting Cameron Brown back. I think that they're going to need to see a little bit more consistency out of the linebacker position. And most importantly, they need to be able to get to the quarterback a little bit more. They were not able to get to the Minnesota quarterback as much. They did have that big momentum-changing play where Zach Harrison came in and had the strip sack and was picked up by Haskell Garrett and taken in for a touchdown. It just needs to be a little bit more of a consistent effort, but I think really it comes down to just not bringing wave after wave of players in because nobody really got any footing under them.
Kevin, what is the key to the game for Ohio State as a whole, offensively, defensively, for them to punch away with a touchdown and win that game?
I think defensively, they just need to be able to account for Anthony Brown. I mean, he's just a tremendous dual threat type of guy. Don't get lulled into what you saw out of the Fresno State game, is that's what Oregon's all about. They're going to play a lot better than what they did against Fresno State in this one, but they need to make sure that they get after that mobile quarterback. On the other side, just play your game. Don't try and react to what's going on. You're Ohio State. You're the number 3 team in the nation for a reason. Run your offense. C.J. Stroud needs to get out there. They need to be able to let him make some throws. And I think that they really need to make sure that they play their best running backs at this point. We saw Mayan Williams break a big touchdown early in the game. Trevion Henderson came in late. He looked great. Don't have a 4-man rotation at running back. Have a 2-man rotation there.
All right, Max, let's get your perspective for Oregon. What do they have to do to come away with a victory?
When we're looking at the Ducks in this big matchup, I really think that it starts with physicality. This is a matchup that has national attention for a reason, and with all the hype building up behind Mario Cristobal and the Ducks, building that physical brand of football, winning in the trenches, they're going to have to show that they have that energy, because they certainly didn't have it, at least not to the degree that they wanted to against Fresno State. And I think, we're just going to look on offense and defense real quick here. Defensively, I think they really got to stick to their assignments and coverage. Ohio State has the best wide receivers in the country. So that's certainly going to be something to watch, and they got to play disciplined. How are we going to look in this Tim DeRuyter defense in the first really big game for him, getting it real early in his time at Oregon here. And then offensively, I think that you need to get the ball going on the ground first, because that's kind of what opens up this whole offense. And if I'm Joe Moorhead, I'm throwing the entire kitchen sink at the Ohio State defense, pulling out all the stops. There's a number of talented true freshmen and redshirt freshmen that have gotten a lot of buzz coming out of fall camp here in Eugene. We didn't see Troy Franklin too much. He was limited with an injury, Cristobal said this week. So he's gotten a lot of attention on the national scene as far as what he could maybe do to impact the game. He's starting as a true freshman. And then we also have young running backs, Seven McGee and Byron Cardwell, as well as Trey Benson. So we didn't see any of those guys in the opener. So it's time to really open up the playbook and give the Buckeyes the best shot that the Ducks have.
Max Torres, Kevin Noon, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
No problem.
All right, guys, time to get into the big storylines in college football. So many games to go into, but the one I want to begin with is the old Southwest Conference rivalry between Texas and Arkansas. We're joined by Tera Talmadge of PigTrailNation.com, also does the sports there for NBC. Tera, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited about this weekend. I think a lot of people are ready for the rivalry between Arkansas and Texas to start back up again.
All right, so let's start things off with booing. Last week, there was some booing, which I wasn't expecting. How weird was that to hear that in Fayetteville?
It was very surprising, to be honest. But, I've talked to a couple of different people about it, and I think we've all come to the conclusion that it's kind of like PTSD from everything that Arkansas fans have been through the past several years. And so anything that really reminds them of what we saw in 2018, 2019 kind of triggers them to think, oh my gosh, are we going back to that? And so it was concerning, regardless, though, that first half from Arkansas. Thankfully, they turned things around. So I think fans are on board and looking forward to this next game.
So what changed, though? Because at one point there was no offense, and then 5 of 6 possessions, Arkansas started scoring again. Was it because you're taking on Rice, or did something click?
I think something started to click. I mean, you go into halftime and you're down to Rice. And look, we don't know how good Rice is yet. It's only one game. We could look back at this game a few weeks from now and say, man, Rice really was good. Or we could look back and say, Rice really wasn't that good. I don't know what happened. But I think that Sam Pittman really made some adjustments in halftime. And I think Kendall Briles, the offensive coordinator for Arkansas, made a lot of adjustments as well. The offense looked out of sync to me. And I think some of the play calling was a little off as well for KJ Jefferson. He was starting to make some short passes, but we never really saw him air it out. And so that's something that I think that they changed going into that second half.
Help me understand the vibe there in Fayetteville. Does it feel like a rivalry game? I think Texas and Arkansas haven't played each other in over a decade, right? Something like that. It's been a while.
It's been a very long time since the two of these teams have played. And it's interesting because we've talked a lot about it over the past several years, just because for an older generation, this is 100% a huge rivalry. But for a lot of the guys that are on the team, most of them will probably say that LSU, Texas A&M, those are their biggest rivals. But everyone knows the importance of this game and a lot of the close games that Arkansas and Texas have played in the past. So there's a lot on the line for this one, especially with Texas joining the SEC in the future.
Tera, Texas is a different animal, no doubt about that, than Rice. What does Arkansas have to do differently that we didn't see there against Rice?
A lot. A lot of things definitely need to be done differently in order to take a win over Texas. This is going to be a taller task for sure. For starters, KJ Jefferson has to get into a rhythm early, and a lot of his star guys have to actually show up. Traylon Burks was definitely rusty in his first showing for Arkansas this season. He was battling a leg injury over the past several weeks. He was in and out of a boot, so he wasn't practicing as much. So we'll just say that he was knocking off the rust in that first game. He had a lot of drops. Hopefully he can step up. Also, you had a lot of guys that got penalties. That has to be cleaned up. Special teams. Arkansas has had special teams issues for several seasons. That has to improve under Scott Fountain. This is his second season. It's got to make a difference sometime soon, because eventually those errors on special teams are going to cost them a big game.
So, Tara, is this a statement game for Sam Pittman? Does he need this game? I mean, obviously, you want to start off the season 2-0. I know the obvious part of that, but just for what it means for the rebuilding that he's doing there.
I don't want to say he needs this game. I think he's in a pretty good spot with a lot of Arkansas fans. However, a win over Texas would solidify his role at Arkansas and his place, honestly, in the history for Arkansas, and really getting the Razorbacks back to what they should be, because it's been a long time since that program has been respected, really. And I think that Sam Pittman started off things really good last year with 3 SEC wins, but yes, it would be a statement win for him to defeat Texas.
All right, that is Tera Talmadge, PigTrailNation.com. Tara, we appreciate it. We'll catch up with you again.
Sounds great.
All right, now we turn our attention to Florida and South Florida. And do we have a quarterback controversy brewing out there in Gainesville? Adam Silverstein of OnlyGators.com joins us. Adam, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on the show. So before we get into Emory and the storylines there, I'm looking at the stat lines, okay? And I see, obviously, a 21-point victory. Sounds nice. I see that Florida was able to rush the ball for 400 yards. There were some turnovers. What was the big issue in this game? Why were people walking away not pleased with what they saw from the Gators?
It's two things. I think on the offensive side, it's consistency. You know, when you are breaking in a new quarterback, especially when you're coming off of a Kyle Trask who set record upon record upon record for Florida, you want to see that the guy can throw the ball. And the truth is, Emory Jones, he's a redshirt junior. He's been waiting his time. I wrote a story about him maybe being the most patient man in college football, a top 100 quarterback who decided to stay and not transfer to all these other schools despite immediate eligibility, despite all this great stuff. And he finally gets the opportunity. You're playing FAU, no disrespect to them, but certainly a team that you would hope he could throw on, and he wasn't able to throw on them. So the consistent offensive performance through the air, I think, was the biggest problem. And then defensively, I mean, Florida had shut them out through about 3 quarters, but Gator fans are very sensitive right now to this defense, considering how badly it played last year under Todd Grantham. And I think at the end of that game, you know, playing back a little bit, allowing FAU to drive the ball down the field, score 2 touchdowns late, it ruined the confidence that maybe the team was feeling, despite some really good play up front for most of the game.
So staying with Emory for a moment, he started off pretty good, but he ended poorly. What happened in the game that kind of derailed him?
I chalk it up to mental mistakes primarily, through to the wrong receiver and through a pick, an interception in the end zone. The next red zone drive either didn't realize it was 4th down or made the wrong check, and they got stopped and didn't score. So that's 2 red zone opportunities. That's potentially 14 more points that he could have put on the board. Even if the touchdowns were scored via rushing plays, you know, 49 points looks way different than 35 does in that game. So there were a couple mental mistakes, a couple bad throws, staring down his receivers. It's a lot of things that you would expect to see from a freshman, a redshirt freshman, or maybe even a sophomore, but someone who's been in the program 4 years, working under the tutelage of Dan Mullen. As someone following Florida football, as the entire fan base watched that game, they saw a guy that they had really high hopes for, and those hopes started to crack and crumble a little bit.
What about Anthony Richardson? What did he do that really shined and made people say, maybe we got a little issue here?
Well, it's pure electricity, right? So yeah. Gator fans know what that type of quarterback looks like. They have seen Tim Tebow. They had Cam Newton. Obviously, he eventually wound up at Auburn, and they saw what he did at Auburn. So this is a guy who is large. He has a really big arm. I think Dan Mullen this week said for Hail Mary plays, he's going to be the guy, even if he doesn't start or even if he isn't playing in a game. But they see all those intangibles. He's a redshirt freshman. And look, the most popular guy on any team is the second quarterback whenever the starter's not playing well, right? So you combine all of that, 2 early interceptions for Emory Jones. This guy comes in, he's trucking defenders. He's leapfrogging defenders. He runs for a 73-yard touchdown. He converts a 3rd and 20 with 22 yards with his legs. And you're looking at him and you're saying, how is this not the guy? How is Emory Jones the starter and Anthony Richardson is not? But then you look at the throwing numbers as well. They weren't nice either. So the Gators may have 2 quarterbacks who are incredibly athletic and electric, and maybe neither of them can throw. We don't know. It's been 1 game, but we'll find out.
All right, so I know Dan Mullen, obviously known for his work with quarterbacks and offenses. The running game last week was phenomenal. What did you see there?
Good job by the offensive line across the board. A lot of people want to give credit to the quarterbacks and the running backs, and they deserve it. They played well. But that offensive line, there's a lot of guys on that unit that are back from last year, and it seems like they're gelling and figuring things out. Certainly having 2 talented running backs like Damian Pierce, and Malik Davis on the team. And they have 5 talented running backs on the team, but those guys getting the majority of work. 2 quarterbacks who can run the ball, which Kyle Trask did not, even though he was a willing runner. That opens up obviously additional lanes for the running backs. So it was really just a combination of all 3 of those things working together in harmony against an FAU defensive line that was a little bit undersized as well. It created a ton of opportunities. The question is, will they have that same success now against a team in South Florida that knows they're going to try to do that? And then what happens in 2 weeks when Alabama comes to town?
Well, let's talk about that. What do they need to do against South Florida to be ready for that Alabama game?
For me, it's 100% working on, throwing the ball and secondary issues. The secondary seemed a little bit out of sorts in that game. A lot of new guys starting there. It's, can that unit come together, prevent the big play, and play the type of defense that the front 7 already seems to be. The defensive line seems much improved. They're attacking the quarterback, getting at runners, the second level. The linebackers are doing a great job. It's, can that secondary, which historically at Florida has been a position of strength, can that secondary really step up and play as well as the rest of the defense did in week 1 against FAU? And then offensively, that ground attack, like you kind of mentioned, it was the tops for Dan Mullen at Florida, the most rushing yards in any game. And it was week 1 of the 2021 season, coming out of a 2020 season where he set passing records at Florida. So it's okay if the offense changes, but you still have to be able to throw the ball. So I think the entire onus of the offense finding success in week 2 is simply, can Emory Jones and or Anthony Richardson get better play throwing the ball down the field, connecting with receivers, not staring guys down and not turning the ball over.
Adam Silverstein, OnlyGators.com. We appreciate your time, my friend. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Good job, man.
Awesome.
We'll email you next week and try to figure out something for the Alabama game.
Sounds good. Appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you, sir. Take care. All right, we're closing out with a little Michigan and Washington. Chris Balas of the Wolverine.com and joining us, a guy that I've known for a long, long time. Chris, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. So after 1 week, what have we learned about this new incarnation of Jim Harbaugh in Michigan?
Not a whole lot, right? After 1 week, what do you really know? You look at last year, Michigan played Minnesota and trounced them, and everybody thought, hey, this is a Big Ten contender, and they found their quarterback in Joe Milton. A year later, Joe Milton's gone. Michigan's coming off a 2-4 season. But the one thing I will say is there was a lot more energy out there, and they looked a lot more organized. Jim Harbaugh looked a lot more involved. So that's a positive. And we're going to find out more about this Michigan team against a Washington team that loses to FCS Montana. So, week 2 is really what Jim Harbaugh said the other day, when you really kind of find out more about your team. And we're not going to know a lot about this Michigan team really until about week 4 or 5, when that defensive line is tested by some really good offensive lines, I think. But it's a good start. You did what you were supposed to do against a MAC opponent. So that's a positive for Michigan football.
So how demoralizing was the loss of Ronnie Bell for the season? Obviously, one of the big guys that Michigan has going for them.
Yeah, just wrote a column on it. There's no replacing this guy. It looked like he was really starting to move into that upper echelon of Big Ten receivers. And Michigan hasn't had elite receiver play probably in about 15 years. You got to go back to Braylon Edwards and Steve Brest and Jason Avant, guys that played in the NFL. Ronnie Bell was a 2-star guy, and he was never expected to be that guy. But he had just emerged to the point where, wow, some of the plays that he made on Saturday, a one-handed grab that was called back, big punt return, really nice 76-yard touchdown grab. So he was ready to get up there, and they don't have a guy like him on the roster. So really probably one of the few guys, even though that's a deep receiver room, one of the few guys that they could least afford to lose, really going to hurt going forward.
Chris, it's been a long time since there's been consistent good quarterback play there at Michigan. Denard Robinson's the last name that really comes to mind of having an impact. It looked like Cade McNamara found his rhythm, though.
Yeah, he did. And, everybody keeps talking about J.J. McCarthy, the true freshman who came in. He was a 5-star guy, and he's probably the future. I talked to somebody in the building, and they said, hey, if you want to win games in the short term, Cade McNamara is your guy. J.J. McCarthy, though, is the guy that is eventually going to help you beat Ohio State. He's got the big arm. He's got all the intangibles, but it's nice to have that 1-2 punch. Cade McNamara did everything they asked him to do. He's a great game manager, got the ball to his playmakers in space, made all the right calls. His only 2 incompletions were balls knocked down at the line of scrimmage. He's not a big guy, but he's a great leader. And that was really where it started in the offseason, was changing the culture back to what Michigan football used to be. I think Cade McNamara has been that guy, and they really are following him.
Chris, how has Jim Harbaugh evolved since his time there, getting there? And I'm wondering if that arrogance, if you will, that we would see early on, has that evolved as he struggled a little bit? Has it become easier to deal with, perhaps?
Yeah, he's kind of been non-existent, to be honest with you. We barely see him in the offseason. I mean, we maybe get him 2 or 3 times a year. At the beginning of fall camp, we got him on the first day, I think. And of course, you don't know anything about your team at that point. But he's kind of, you used to have the signing of the stars for the recruits. They would bring in 5-star kids, and they'd have a signing of the stars in front of a bunch of fans. And he was very brash, I guess you would say would be the right word for it. You don't see that with him anymore. Right now, he's kind of in the background. He's really delegated a lot more than he did when he first got here. But he looks really good. He looks more involved. He looks more engaged this year. Last year, it was almost like he was missing. There was something not there with him. So has he been humbled a little bit? Maybe. But at the same time, I do think this job is a little bit harder than he thought it would be. You look at Ohio State, national power, it's going to be hard to catch them. That was what he was brought here to do. So it's kind of humbling when you can't catch your rival when you're 0-5 against them in 6 years.
Chris, last thing for you. What must Michigan do to start off the season 2-0?
Yeah, not turn the ball over, number one, not take Washington for granted. This is a team that's going to be much better in the lines than they saw against Western Michigan. Again, Michigan's defensive line hasn't really been tested. The offensive line wasn't really tested. That's where this game's going to be won. I'm expecting a low-scoring game. Washington was without, I think, its top 3 receivers, so they're going to get some guys back. Don't take it for granted, and don't make mistakes. If they do that, I think they're going to come out with a win.
Chris, we appreciate it. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And that does it for Up to the Second College Football. I'm David Nuño. We will see you guys next week.